joining this early morning with Alex from Rose Rocket as a CTO and co-founder of Rose Rocket.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here, Corey. Excited to have the talk. So yeah, Rose Rocket. Let's start with basically what we're trying to do here is kind of like building an operating system for trucking company, and it's called TMS, which is Transportation Management System. We're building the first what we call the network TMS.
Disrupting the whole logistics and transportation system.
Yes, that is the idea.
Everything. You're a co-founder there, and you're CTO, and you're running your engineering org. How much different is it being like that balance of being a founder, but also like a software leader? What do you find really challenging?
It's different from time to time. It depends on the stages, of course. Early stage, as a founder, is definitely you need to wear multiple different hats because there's just so much things to do early days. Then you started hiring your team, and then dynamic changed a little bit, but it's still the same. It's kind of like everybody working in the same room together. So yeah, you can just focus on buildings and then getting to product market fit. Usually at that stage, you also don't have to manage a lot of expectation from the investors as well for the investor, because usually during that stage you only have like the seed rounds, and then later on you grow in a more bigger team. And when you hit product market fit, means that you have an engine where you can put money in and then revenue out. And that's when basically investors starting to like be more involved on like strategic planning or the direction of the company. And then that's when, yeah, maybe we can start raising Series A. And when you raise Series A, definitely you need more responsibility to the stakeholders. But yeah,
Well,
anyway, like the role of the founders really just plugging holes. Any gaps,
plug and
any
hope.
holes, just you got to be there to plug them until you figure it out. And then when you figure it out, you figure out whether you want to have someone to like continue plugging that hole and make it more scalable, like a real solution, like some more specialty.
So how large is the engineering at Rose Rocket these days?
I think we're about, I lost count, but probably 50.
Going from like when you guys were pre-COVID, when you're probably all in the same office of like five, like your co-founder, and like three other people, you could elbow them to
Exactly.
50 now. Did you feel like there was a struggle of keeping culture while being remote during the time? Did you feel like it just became a different playing field to hire?
COVID definitely, or pandemic definitely changed the game of how we built workplace. I actually been listening to a lot of HR podcasts out there, how like a lot of these companies said that like all these HR playbooks just doesn't work anymore ever since like pandemic. Now it's all about co-creating with your employee, start defining who you are and who you are not. And fortunately, my co-founder, Justin Sky, he's really good at like articulating who we are and who we are not since literally like early days. We
Mhm.
have our values defined, what was it, 2 years ago when we were about like
Yep.
50 people. And that really helps like just alignment. I think like the keyword alignment is something that a lot of people discounting, especially when you join a more established company, that those alignment kind of already set. And then, but it's really important to create like the same like unified experience for everybody, whether everybody like agree or not, but hopefully like 90% agree. Because I mean, we did like the values like the hard way. Like most companies, like how they did value is just the founders like go to some retreat, came back with a bunch of values, but we did with like the whole employee, like 50 people of them.
Mhm.
And in the beginning as a founder, I was like, is this going to turn out right? Because like I do have my own personal value. It should reflect to like what's going to come out from like this exercise. But wow, it actually did turn out like pretty good. And I was satisfied with all these.
Have you noticed on the technical side any like hiring challenges? Like
Yeah.
every company is having some level of finding talent, but have you felt like it's just gotten harder to even find talent?
As I said before, we're always good at defining who we are and who we are not. And people self-selected themselves during like the interview process. And then at the end of the interview process, we always like kind of tell them like who we are not. Yeah, like for example, a lot of engineers now they kind of expecting more flexible workplace where they can, yeah, like those hybrid workplace or like full remote. and those
Yep.
type of things. And we've been like making a stance on like we are an office culture. We like the idea of like if like we work 9 to 5, we know like these people are in the office. We also like interacting with people in real time as well. And again, this is growth rocket probably not for everybody. So usually like that is kind of like the pitch during the interview. And then if this is not aligned, then maybe we can part ways as friends. But salary wise, yeah, especially with the US companies now starting to hire in Canada and allowing remote work, like local Canadian company is so hard to compete with like this US company. Like they're
Yep.
paying in US dollar and a lot of like flexibilities.
Yeah. Would you say like that's your most challenging thing as CTO is recruitment?
So in terms of recruitment, I think definitely hiring senior engineer is super, super hard these days, especially like as a senior, you kind of already define who you are. Again, like we as a company define who we are, and
Yep.
you as a senior engineer define who you are, what you want, what's ideal for you, and then getting a match is definitely hard. But yeah,
It sounds like you've got recruitment down and you
yeah.
are just going with whatever comes in the pipeline and there's good overlap. If that's covered, what's your biggest challenge? Like what's your day to day, your biggest number one fear is it product fit? Is it just making sure that engineering delivers on time or
Actually just make sure everybody's happy really like these days because every during these pandemic, as you know, like a lot of people having challenges like mental health issue and trying to find like this balance. It's just like, yeah, helping them figure out, yeah, like how can we help them
yep.
to be more happy? Like at the end
Um
of the day, like you read like the whole like Great Resignation article. That's probably something that's on top of my mind right now as a leader in the company. That's why I've been like listening to all these like HR podcasts. So it's kind of weird. And at the same time, like I don't know why I'm looking into like these HR podcasts because I at the same time like maybe there is an opportunity to marry engineering with like HR, you know, like maybe like data, like how can we make decision with data, but also at the same time with harp as
are you mostly transitioned out of code and it's just mostly managing the the team, the leadership and the business at this point? Or do you still find yourself like in the weeds writing code this
oh
week
my
or
God. I wish I could do that. That is more fun. I definitely miss code. Actually, I do coding on the side and that's to satisfy my curiosity in blockchain. So I learned Solidity recently and start playing around with that thing. And I also started learning serverless as well. I kind of discounted that for a while. I did try it back in 2016 and then tried it a couple more times. And at the time, I felt like the tooling is not there yet. Like the local, for example, back in the day, one of my default serverless was like, it's a bit pain to like do local development, like offline,
Mhm.
things like that. But now I think the tool already caught up. So I started looking into it again and yeah, it's actually more pleasure to work with now.
Where do
Yeah.
you start saying we need to stop doing these short term hacks and start thinking a little bit longer term, whether that's 1 year or 2 years or 3 years?
First thing is hire a VP engineering. So we have like a very amazing VP of engineering. His name is Ian Logan. He came from Airbnb. So he had seen scale.
Yep.
So he joined us like what was it? He put teams into outcomes. So we have like growth, like network, and then we have infrastructures. So no longer is all about output. And and yeah, for example, like infrastructure is more foundational. So like they put like all the important pieces to automate a lot of things so that it will increase the developer experience and enabling developer to move faster.
What I'm hearing is like bring in like the VP of engineering, which handles it sounds like mostly like the structural and day to day stuff. And
Mhm.
then on your side, you're able to kind of take a step back and maybe look a little bit longer where the company is
Yep.
going, make sure it's aligned with what you and Justin's original goal was. An engineer joins, like, what do you think is the best way for them to really either do well in that environment or just, I guess, have impact to want to stay in that environment? It's a very different setup being in a startup versus a mid-sized company versus like a large enterprise company.
My point of view is always I need to find something that like create fire in that belly so that they come to work motivated. There's some like sense of purpose in their life. And in Rose Rocket, it's definitely we have a lot of like really interesting industry challenges. Like some
Mhm.
engineers really like solving these hard challenges. Some engineers are a bit more entrepreneurial. They see like this industry challenges and they're like, they have the power to fix some of those challenges. And those are usually like the type of people that we want to hire. And I think like one of the Rose Rocket DNA is always like try to find home, even though like when they join Rose Rocket, maybe they start with with a role, but maybe along the way, I don't know, maybe life changes, like they don't see the fire in that role anymore. We're always open to like uh find a new home and go shopping.
How do you deal with the emotional toll of employees who obviously don't work out and were other
Oh
let
my,
go?
that is actually like it's definitely taking a lot of, you know, when things didn't work out and then you have to make that hard decisions, especially I mean, like from leadership standpoint and also from like the employee standpoint, like that's when someone let go, it's always creates this feeling of like what happened, and then but at the same time, like we made these hard decisions for the
Yep.
betterment of the company and the business as well. As an engineer myself, like this is something that I have to like level myself up, and it's definitely painful having to go through all these type
I
of like things.
I having fired people myself, like, the individuals who are getting terminated, they don't necessarily understand the other side of the equation. But
Mhm.
what they don't see is, like, there's been times where, like, I haven't slept for, like, days,
Oh yeah.
like, or very little because I'm worried that, like and you can go really far, like, I've let go of individuals who I was actually worried that, like, they were gonna show up at my after I let them go, and they were just gonna be like, "This is unacceptable." There's the other side, which is, like, the toll on the team. Unless it is ridiculously obvious to the team itself, a lot of times it comes to shock, and then
Mhm.
immediately the team feels like their psychological safety has been compromised. So, like, the first thing is, like, there was an issue with one individual. It is not the team. This is
Mhm.
not like a secret layoff. This is
Mhm.
not like your job is on the line.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
always feel like when this goes down, the first thing is like, you know, the whispers in the corridor, like,
Like,
oh my
yeah.
God, did you hear blah 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 got let go? And like, am I next? Or like, have you heard anything? Like,
Yeah, man. That's and then you as a leader as well, you can only like tell them as much as you can tell them. You can't like go deeper because
yeah,
that won't help anything,
yep.
right? You don't want to like say anything bad about that person. You don't want to like get into details where you have to manage people expectations even more after that. At the same time, if you just give enough information, like there's a risk of like they try to like connect the dot themselves, whether if it's like the right dots that they connect or not, you don't know. And then you might have to like deal with the fallback, like a fallout later on when things starting to like spiral out. It's tough.
It's definitely a conversation that I feel like there's not a lot of light shed on. There's not a lot of people really discuss just like that side of it. Going into management, like I knew that was something that would have to be done, but until I had to let go, like the first person, like I didn't understand the consequences and impact of it.
Mhm. Yeah.
After actually sitting someone down and being like, that's it. And, like, understanding the consequences behind that of, like, and everyone's situation is differently, but it could be anything, like, you could be sitting there and knowing that someone just bought, like, a brand new house.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, this is the end, and they're like, "Oh my god, how I just bought a house, how can I afford" So back on the emotional toll stuff,
Yeah.
so
I mean, if I can be vulnerable, it's definitely most of the time just like I guess what the better word, like just kind of like be a robot and kind of like be numb with all of these things. And then some days it's just like so tough that like you just felt like start questioning things and then like kind of like, is this for me? Is this like something that I want to do? But
yeah,
then like at that point, usually like, oh, this is just a reaction. It's like just give it like a couple days and
yeah.
then it's gone again. You're back to robot mode. Uh,
Tell yourself, like, "I've done it before, we've gone through it
yeah.
before, the world didn't end the last time."
Yeah.
Um,
And then you can say
and I
something like, this is actually gonna make them even more happier because they're gonna be able to find like a company that's more aligned with their values and stuff like that. You know, like you start playing all these like stories to make you feel better.
Well,
uh,
sometimes it's, like, truthful, and then sometimes it's the truth that we're telling ourselves, right? Like,
yeah,
it's a lot easier to be like, "Look, it's not gonna be an issue for that person, the market's hot, like, they'll bounce back," like,
exactly, exactly. Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's a lot of leaning in and out between you and your other co-founders, like, that is the true support system at the end of the day. You're
Mhm,
all in relatively the same boat. You all started from the ground up. You all are going through similar conversations and same struggle.
mhm.
Maybe different parts of the org, but because yeah, I just find it very interesting because I don't have that perspective. Like, I did a very small startup. It was me and my co-founders. Like, there was no if it goes to 0, the only people who've lost are the founders themselves, and we all knew that, like, from day 1. Like, that's very different than it goes to 0 or we fuck this up and John over there loses his house,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
because
yeah.
he's banking on, like, the job working. So
Yeah,
I just
exactly. A lot
yeah,
of like that these hard decisions is kind of like we have to protect the company, we have to protect like everybody else. Like if there's one person that's causing trouble, we need to protect like the rest of the people in the organization, even though maybe they don't see it that way. And especially if this one person is like probably maybe one of the nicest person in the company as well. Like the optic just looks different when you let go someone.
yeah. I think this has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah, man,
We'll have to do it again in the future.
for
And
sure.
hopefully next time when I ask you, how big is engineering, it's not 50, it's 500, rocket to the moon.
Amen.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? So Rose Rocket have a band, and our first original is Rocket to the Moon.
Rocket to the moon.